individual dies, usually the next largest will be the one to replace it and change sex. All right, so if we take the clownfish as an example, so if a female dies, so again, remember these are protandrous, so the older, larger individuals are the females. Okay? So you also tend to have a sex ratio skew in sex-changing fishes, right? You're going to have more individuals of the sex, the initial sex, right? And maybe fewer individuals of the changed sex. So in this case, you're going to tend to have more males in the population than fewer females, these dominant large females. In the case of sheephead, it's the opposite, where you have the really large individuals and old individuals are males. And you have a lot of females, fewer males. Okay, so here you have a dominant female. She's got her anemone, her little habitat, right? She guards and hangs out in. If that female dies, you have a little non-dominant male, okay? Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. The male, a more dominant male, okay, is going to change into a female. So they have, these are some individuals that are sort of undifferentiated, kind of just here. And then you have a new male coming in, okay, and a dominant female within the anemone. So it's just, this is just showing a bit of the kind of social aspect. You're going to have a combo, you're going to have one dominant female on that anemone. Okay, they're very localized. They have these kind of small little territories, which is one of them. And then you're going to have some non-dominant males in the area. The maybe more dominant male is going to be the one that's going to be able to gain access to the female to mate. Okay, and will probably be the one that, if that female dies, will replace her in that area. Okay, we're getting there. So larval fish get nutrients from a yolk sac, typically. Okay. The mouth and digestive tract develop when the yolk sac is absorbed. This usually happens within the planktonic stage, okay, once it's released and developing. The initial part, So, sorry, I read that in a weird way. So they're in the plankton. They're using up that yolk sac until they get to a size or a developmental stage where they can actually feed themselves. Okay? And then they will, shortly after that stage, will typically settle onto a reef or whatever habitat they typically live in. And the timing of that varies a lot, and it's very species dependent and habitat. Schooling we talked about a little bit last time, and we talked a little bit about the lateral line of fishes. Does anyone remember what the lateral line is? We looked at it in the...
We have pores that...
The little pores, yeah, that run the length of the body typically, and then what?
Feel the...
Yeah, so yeah, they're fluid filled, they even have a little hair in them so they can sense pressure differences, waves, things like that, motion. Okay? So typically the lateral line, so this is probably part of the lateral line here, you can see the little dots along the body. Okay? They're often used in schooling behavior because they can actually keep kind of equidistant from each other, and they sense that, not necessarily visually, there's probably some visual cues too, but they can sense it. Or any slight movement. If one of the lead fish turns quickly, they can all turn really quickly. And you've probably seen like videos of fish doing that where they're just like, and they all do it at the same time. And that's all based on the lateral line. So a lot of fish exhibit this behavior, schooling behavior. Sometimes it's something they do just when they're young or juvenile. Sometimes they're fish that do it throughout their lives and as adults. Often a way to deter predation, and also just a way to sort of keep together for future mating purposes and feeding. So again, with a lot of fish together, they can kind of use that group behavior to avoid predation and also finding food. It can become confusing. I think I mentioned that I sometimes have to actually hunt for some fish that often are schooling, and it can be confusing. Like if there's a group of them kind of moving fast together, it's like, I don't know. And I always sort of laugh at myself. I'm like, oh, it works on me too. It's not just another fish. So it's hard to sort of pinpoint a single individual if there's a big group of them who's inviting. And then there's some data showing that it can increase hydrodynamic efficiency for them to swim together like that. And then, yeah, potentially, I think I mentioned this a minute ago, but potentially, if you're staying in groups, then you've already got potential mates around you and close by. Yeah.
What does it mean to have greater hydrodynamic efficiency?
So swimming together in a tight school can actually increase the efficiency with which they can move through the water. So there's a couple different ways in which that happens. Some of it is like the little micro eddies that come off the body can actually reduce the drag on ones behind you. And then there's also some data showing that a lot of fish are kind of slimy, they produce mucus, and some of that actually sloughs off and can actually make it easier to go through the water for other ones around you. I'm sure that's at a very small level, but it's kind of like drafting behind like a truck or something. If you like you're behind it, yeah. Kind of similar idea. Those are just really just some pictures. So with schooling, vision is still an important part of that. Okay, they do use primarily their lateral line, but most fishes, not all, a lot of them are visual, so they kind of see each other. They can also hear. They use pheromones, so they can smell. All of those cues are important for behaviors like schooling or any kind of group, and also mate acquisition and food acquisition. Okay. There are a lot of fish that migrate. Migrations can happen on a daily or seasonal level. For daily migrations, that's typically for the purposes of feeding or avoiding predators at certain times of day. So I mentioned that some fish will come out, and also for spawning purposes. And I mentioned earlier that sometimes fish will tend to spawn at dusk, because at dusk there tends to be a changeover between the night and day fishes, and it's usually sort of a quieter time on most reefs. So a lot of fish will make use of that, where there's not a lot of predators around, and there's sort of this changeover time in order to spawn, so that not everything's immediately eating their eggs. And also during spawning behaviors, if you have a fish that does a lot of courtship behavior, sometimes that behavior is very obvious. They'll do these little dips or spawning rushes, and it can make them vulnerable to predation as well, the adults also. So sometimes fish will move for the purposes of spawning, for the purposes of finding a food source, or just avoiding predators. And that can be a long migration, or it can be kind of on and off a reef, so it just depends. Some fish will actually move between freshwater and marine environments as well. I'm sure you're somewhat aware of salmon that will start out in freshwater areas, go out to sea for a few years, and come back into a stream in order to spawn. So those are both catadromous and anadromous fishes. So catadromous is freshwater to seawater to spawn. Anadromous is seawater to freshwater to spawn. And in some cases, those are many miles that they'll travel to go back to their owners. Okay. Another example of that are freshwater eels. They're catadromous. They'll migrate in the fall down the river to the ocean. get to spawning grounds and they go out to the Sargasso Sea. So they travel pretty far, typically. And kind of like salmon, after they spawn or reproduce, they typically die. Let's see. Hold on 1 second. Let's see if I actually want to, maybe 1 sec here, 2 secs, because I'm running a little short on time. Yeah, I think I'm actually going to stop there, and we'll go into the taxonomy part. But first, as just a fun little break, we haven't really even delved into these guys yet. But I'm going to show. Anyone know what an anglerfish is?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll get into, we'll talk about them a bit more when we get into, we do the deep sea lecture. But given that you guys seem to really enjoy the last little video thing I showed you, I thought I'd do another. There's another one on anglerfish, which is pretty fun. So, and even though we're doing fish, I figured it appropriate. We're talking about reproduction. So anglerfish are deep sea fish, and this will explain a bit more about it. But essentially, when you're in the deep sea, it's sometimes hard to find a mate, as I referred to earlier. In the case of a lot of anglerfish, the larger individuals are females, and the males are essentially these sort of lame little swimming sperm sacs that will, that's nothing against you boys, it's actually true. They're really small, they have like very little musculature, they'll swim around and attach to a female, basically parasitize a female in order to reproduce. So they'll basically just latch onto a female when they find one. She will absorb the sperm through the body cavity, and that's how they mate. So they're basically like a little parasite. So it's quite a unique little strategy. And so, as you can imagine, one of those funny videos was created about them.
Few facts about the anglerfish. The female anglerfish comes in many shapes, colors, and shades of ugly. It's like a rainbow of ugly. The male anglerfish is tiny by comparison, like a tiny little baby. He attaches himself to the female by biting her, and then digesting part of his face so he fuses with her flesh. He then atrophies, losing his digestive organs, brain, heart, and eyes, and winds up nothing more than a pair of gonads, which release sperm when needed. Hey there, pretty lady. Nice gonads. To the female anglerfish, the human male is a very loud, annoying, and unnecessarily complicated pair of gonads. And the anglerfish is a master of disguise, hiding itself among the sand and rocks of the ocean floor. Here, an anglerfish compares its camouflaging skills with that of a flounder. Also a master. Holy crap! Did you? What the f? To hunt, the anglerfish waves things in front of its mouth that its prey is attracted to. Here, the anglerfish waves a lovely pashmina shawl, just the size for an unsuspecting shrimp. Here, another one presents a lovely pair of leggings. And here, a decorative hat feather. Sadly, the shrimps and their vanity pay the ultimate price. Death. The deep sea anglerfish collects glowy bacteria in its wavy thing to create a tiny little light. Because it's dark as hell down there, and someone needs to light up that pretty lady.